wonder
Inherent in
if you could
every
talk a little bit
community
about
is the
you
wisdom to
referenced your
solve its own
time.
problems.
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Let's face it, Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably in the world. Chief Influencer features leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and fast-changing environment. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these incredible leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer, and today we're going to bring you something a little different. This is a special compilation episode featuring some of our past chief influencers, guests who are leaders from across media, public health, politics, and advocacy. They're sharing their insights on two traits I believe every great leader has to master: listening and authenticity. Because here's the truth. People don't want polished. They want real. In a world where everyone's fighting for attention, influence doesn't come from being the loudest voice in the room. It comes from earning trust. And trust is built when people feel heard, when they feel like they're seeing the real you. So in this episode, we've pulled together some of the most powerful moments from our conversations that reflect these realities. First, you'll hear from Emma O'Brien of Dow Jones on why faces are the new logos and why the most powerful brands today are often built on authentic human connection. You'll hear from Arthur Evans of the American Psychological Association on the power of listening to communities, uncovering solutions from them in unexpected places, and why sometimes leaders have to take risks if they want to truly make an impact. You'll hear from Lesley Lopez from the George Washington University, where she leads the Master's in PR program. She's also a Maryland State Delegate. She's talking about owning your story, embracing vulnerability, and building coalitions, even in the most divided environments. And finally, you'll hear from Jeff Todd from Prevent Blindness on why relationships are everything and how showing up consistently, both online and offline, can strengthen your influence over time. If there's one thing these leaders remind us of, it's this: the best leaders, the best chief influencers, they don't just talk, they listen, they connect, and they show up authentically. They show folks who the real them is. I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your view on the individual faces in today's world, because we're seeing the media landscape has changed so much over a short amount of time. And I think folks are wondering, where's that going? But also if I do want to embrace that, what's the most important thing about it? So what's your take on that? Do you think faces are the new logos?
Yeah. I have two primary thoughts on that. And they actually, I think, are in some ways counterintuitive to each other. But the first thought is yes. I mean, there's an element of trust when you feel like you get to know someone. I mean, when you listen to podcasts, if you listen to the same podcast week after week after week, that person's in your head. That voice is in your ear. That voice is, with you for your commute, multiple times a week or multiple times a day sometimes. And you develop a relationship and a basis of trust with that person, whether it's value, whether it's true or not. There's a familiarity there. And I think that is borne out in, also this election. You definitely saw the people who are using the platforms. And so you're looking at the platforms, you're looking at TikTok and you're saying, wow, people are getting their news from, this fill in the blank TikTok name or TikTok voice. And it's because there's an aura of authenticity when you feel like you're just having a conversation with someone. Like we're having a conversation right now. This feels authentic. You're not an AI and you're not a logo that I'm trying to look at on the other side of it.
Am I not an AI?
Oh my.
They're getting so good, I feel like
to tell, yeah. But there isn't, so there's that authenticity thing where if if you have a good brand that is enhanced by the authentic humans that are able to step out and support that. And so, anyone that you see outside, at the Wall Street Journal, or Emma Tucker, of course, she's trusted, she's public, she's out there talking about the journalism, or Almar Latour, who is also out there talking about the value of information and the information ecosystem. You get to know these people and you get to know these voices, and it helps to drive the trust that you have in either a brand or a person or a personality. And so in that way, I think, yes, the faces are aligned with the brand, and can enhance brand trust and can enhance that. On the flip side, so then here's the counterpoint to that is, inside a business, you have to be authentic and you have to be an honest broker in everything that you do, and particularly in a role like mine, where I am working horizontally, I'm working directly with the CEO, and I'm working with employees. And there's if you're not authentic, and if you are playing games, and if you're not seen to be trustworthy, or if you're in some way untrustworthy by nature, then you will not be able to influence or achieve the things that you need to achieve. And so it's not necessarily about being the face of something. You don't have to be the face of something if you're working internally in a business, but more about, what are you bringing to the table every day, and can you be trusted? And a lot of that has to do with the personality that you have.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. You said you have to do both, and that means there's a lot you have to do. And I think that's a real challenge, because in business strategy, of course, they always say, the real question is like what not to do. That's how you figure out what your strategy is, all this stuff to avoid. And so when it feels like you have to do a little bit of everything, but then we know strategy is all about making those choices. Is that part of managing those stakeholders? Do you have a lot of people raising their hands saying, well, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this, and you kind of have to help figure out which ones to not do?
Yeah, exactly. And you have to stage gate the opportunities too. I mean, you can't just come in on day one and say, we're going to do all of these things, and we're going to hire 100 people, and we're going to develop this business, and this is how it's going to happen on day one. Well, you literally can't even hire 100 people in one day. It's actually impossible. And so to understand the actual process of building a business and assessing the opportunity and finding the early wins so that you create momentum in your growth strategy is really important. And so you have to be able to say no. And most of the time, I don't say no, or we don't say no. It's a not yet, or this is great, but we should put this in phase 3, or what's the longer term growth strategy? In one of our businesses, our leader has massive ambitions, and we love that. I would rather work with someone who has 100 ideas that we can only do 20 of them than someone who has no ideas and just says, well, this is the business and this is how it's going to run. And so figuring out the way to stage that opportunity and stage that growth is actually way more valuable than just saying no. Because I am a firm believer of, let's get to a yes. Let's figure out a way to do these things, even if it's not today, even if it's not now.
Yeah. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you referenced your time in Philadelphia, where you were the commissioner for the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. And then you talked about that sort of 3-phase, sort of the overlapping framework. Could you talk about some of the real life examples from that time of things that you tried and things that worked? Because, I understand that during that period, there were some pretty interesting experiments and interesting applications that you were able to put into practice.
Oh yeah. Well, there were so many things, and I learned so much from the people that I work with, and I just love that work and the people I work with. I was just thinking about one story of one of the things that I really paid a lot of attention to was making sure that communities and voices that are often not heard or easy to overlook, that we were paying attention to those communities. And in Philadelphia, we have lots of communities like that. For example, the Southeast Asian communities, relatively small compared to the whole population, but significant, often will not come into the traditional treatment system. And so if we want to serve that community well, we have to first talk to those communities and understand how they understand their challenges and come up with solutions. And so uh, one of the organizations I work with came to me one day and said, look, we have a lot of women in our community who are depressed. They are widows. Their husbands died in the Vietnam War. They're here, they're isolated, and they're very depressed. But what we think that the solution is to do something they call Jook breakfasts, JOOK. And what they talked about was, we think that one of the problems is that these women don't have this sense of having having a meaningful role within our community. And what we want to do is to bring them together with kids in the daycare program that was near where these women were, going during the day. And so what they asked of me was to fund that. And so we funded those breakfasts. Women started to have these relationships, these meaningful relationships with these children. And what they observed is that over time, what they were seeing in terms of the depression went away, right? So if you were to ask a typical policy person like myself like I was, these women have depression, what is the solution? What we would often say is, well, we need to get those women to a treatment program, and we need to assess them for medication, and perhaps we need to give them medication and then start them on psychotherapy. That would have been our solution. But when you listen to communities and you hear what their understanding of the issue is and their understanding of the solutions, you get some very innovative solutions. And one thing that I want to point about this is we're not just, again, I'll speak for myself. We were not just sort of listening and only following the lead of the people that we were listening to. We were bringing our expertise as mental health professionals. I knew that was a very interesting but probably effective solution because I know the research around one of the things that drives depression is social isolation. So it's actually really unique. They didn't understand maybe the science of it, but they understood the community. And so it was those kinds of solutions that I really appreciated and really came out of this way of working with people that recognizes the expertise that people in communities have. And in fact, one of the sayings I have is inherent in every community is the wisdom to solve its own problems. And so when I come at problems that way, what I understand is, sure, I have something to bring as a psychologist, got lots of training, many years of training, but communities also have very important solution and understanding.
Yeah, and obviously there's so much we can do with technology to gather information, but there's also no replacement for just showing up and the conversations that you might have in a room that, picking things up that you wouldn't get from, putting out a poll or a survey, right?
Yeah. Let me give you another example of, talking about reaching and listening to people. If you go to Philadelphia, one of the things you'll see are murals all over the city. And that program is run by a woman named Jane Golden, who's just this phenomenal person. But I was listening to Jane one day, and Jane described, this is early in my tenure in Philadelphia, and she described this process that, these are not a solo artist, on the side of a building. It's actually, they would bring people from the community together. They would talk about the concept, and they would work with an artist, and then they would paint the mural together collectively. And at the time, we were thinking about the issue of stigma and how do we reduce stigma in the community. So I went to Jane. I said, Jane, could some of the topics of the murals that you're painting be about mental health and those kinds of things? And that started a partnership that I think continues today. But we painted so many murals in the city, and actually I'd funded those projects, and I used them as a way of having conversations with people that would otherwise be very difficult. So, for example, we did a mural on the issue of suicide. If I go to the community and say, I'm a commissioner from behavioral health, I'd like to talk to you about suicide. Like 5 people would show up and 3 of them would be related to me, right? It's very difficult to have those kind of conversations. But we literally had, hundreds of people who would come and be a part of that. And then that gave us an opportunity to have a discussion that we wouldn't ordinarily have. And, one of the reasons I like that example is that as an appointed political person, tend to play it pretty safe, right? That was pretty risky because I could have easily been criticized for why are you spending money on art, quote unquote, when we have people who need mental health. I saw it very differently. What I saw was we have a challenge. If we don't deal with the issue of stigma, there are many people who are going to continue to die. Many people are going to continue to suffer. And for me, it was worth the risk of doing that because ultimately I knew that we could reach people that we would not otherwise reach. Now, it turns out, fast forward, we have people literally from around the world that came and people, in other countries now are doing that. But at the time it was pretty risky because that wasn't sort of an accepted, known way to do it. And I point that out simply that I think if we really want to reach people that we are not typically reaching, we can't do the same things that we've always done and expect a different result. Sometimes it's going to mean taking a risk to reach people that we would not otherwise reach.
I think that's part of it is, doing the right outreach and getting in front of people. The other thing, though, that she said that I thought was really interesting was the importance of owning your own story, back to what you were talking about around authenticity. And, she'd been in a heavy metal band and there had been, Facebook pictures of her, drinking and, things that her opponent was maybe trying to use against her. And she just came out, talked about it and said, I'm going to own the story before somebody else gets to frame it. And anything that somebody can say bad about me, I'm just going to own it and say, yeah, I partied. And, but this is what I'm focused on now.
Yeah.
And do you think that's important when you're, especially in today's, age of social media, where there's all these photos floating around out there of everybody, of just sort of owning your story? Is that part of the key to authenticity for somebody who wants to be in the public sphere today?
Yeah. So, speaking as both an elected official and a political communications person, voters are so targeted and marketed that they are really sophisticated in sniffing out who's trying to sell them something and who's being fake and who's presenting a product as opposed to showing up as a person. Right. And you have to work with your team of folks to figure out what's the best way to present that. But if you are in denial of your story or you don't know how to talk about your lived experiences, you're losing opportunities to connect with people. And admittedly, I struggled with it because I always want to put myself forward as, I am a professional woman. I am a working mother. I don't want to talk about my vulnerabilities. In order for me to, pay for my degrees, I had to work as a domestic worker. I don't want people to, know all of the trying moments of my life. But I also have to tell the story about how when you're scrubbing pots and pans and dishes, you can let your mind wander and you can think about what kind of life you want. And now, as a lawmaker, I don't have to dream about that. I'm in a position to enact those things and change policy, not just for myself, but for people who might be experiencing some type of similar struggle, right? Or people who might, be working poor, or people, dealing with childcare issues or food insecurity or whatever it might be. And so, you have to step outside of that image of who you think a politician is supposed to be and just be a real person.
Yeah.
Just speak from the heart. People want to hear people that they can connect with. And when you try to show up as too polished or a product that's not, it doesn't resonate with people.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. you have to influence other people who are part of your caucus, and even people who are elected who, are not in your own party, to get anything done. I wonder if you could
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what you've learned through that experience on your own, but also maybe what you've observed from others that you've seen across your career when you were a staffer working alongside other delegates, about the power of influencing one's peers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to quote Nancy Pelosi, or to paraphrase Nancy Pelosi, you have to learn how to throw a punch and take a punch, right? But she was Speaker of the House. It's a much different position in terms of like power and authority than it is being a rank and file member. As a rank and file person, it's all about coalition building, and so you have to figure out how the work that you are doing will positively impact other communities outside of your district, right? Or other sectors outside of your district. And so, to my earlier point about picking up the phone and calling people who disagree with you, it can be kind of the same type of thing when it comes to talking to your peers in the General Assembly, right? It come it's a better piece of legislation if you've done all the work to talk to all the different stakeholders and bring everyone together, right? There's a common expression that like any good bill takes 3 years and it's going to piss everyone off a little bit and make people a little bit happy. And so that's like the framework. It's always going to take a little bit to get everybody engaged and involved. And not everyone is going to get what they want. You don't want to create like winners and losers in that way, in terms of like political coalition building. You just want to make sure that everyone feels like they're being respected and heard and included. That's really difficult in a really partisan environment that we're in. Like, I don't mean to paint a rosy picture and say that like it's just like, holding hands and skipping through a meadow every day. Like, it really takes a lot of work. And you have to figure out what your personal style is for fighting with respect,
Yeah.
right? Like, a lot of it is fighting and finding consensus, but not compromising. And so there's a little bit of a difference there. But you got to, like, on my big ghost gun bill, we had to get support of one of the NRA backed senators. And that was tough, but I had to listen to his amendments and what he had to offer. And in the end, it became a stronger bill, and we were able to get Republican support on a gun bill, which is not something that happens except for, every 30 years or something.
Yeah. Sounds like a difficult task to get somebody who is backed by the NRA to support a bill like that. And
Yeah,
talk a little
not
bit more
fun.
about that. Was authenticity part of the, formula to make that happen?
Yeah, I think, you have to approach this work as a real person, right? Like, I know people see political folks in kind of a two-dimensional lens sometimes, and it's not really about the candidate. It's about how people feel about the candidate, or how people feel about their elected officials. Do people feel heard? Do they feel respected? Do they feel like you are approachable if they come up to you in the grocery store with their problem, and that you're competent enough to act on it, right? They just need to have that connection there with you. And so it does take work. You have to do that with your peers as well. They have to know that you're not going to throw them under the bus or say disparaging remarks if you're in the middle of a negotiation. Like, it just I guess like any workplace, how can you work with people in your office if you're going to be bad mouthing them or something?
How do you go about getting coalitions together, especially folks that have their own priorities and, they might think, oh, I'm going to water down what I'm doing if I jump on what you're doing, because this is kind of your core issue. And what have you learned about that in your leadership?
I think the biggest thing, and this is one of the things that I think is core to my own leadership style, is building strong relationships.
Mhm.
And so it's not just coming to someone when we have something we want them involved in. It's building these relationships over time. And it's not just me, it's all of our staff. Everything we do is done in coalition or partnership. And so, it's about meeting with people regularly. It's about sharing what we're up to, listening to what they're up to. and being there to support them when they have something that they're interested in. We're not going to sign on to everything that all of our partners are doing, nor do we expect them to do the same. But when they come to us, we take those requests seriously, and we support the things that where there's a nice crossover, and we look for the same. And so it makes it a lot easier when I go to someone and say, hey, we have this exciting bill, would you consider signing on? When we've signed on to something they did a year ago, it makes it a lot easier. And so it's really about that long game. It's about partnerships. It's about playing well in the sand. We don't always agree with all of our partners, but we have some commonality with everyone that we work with, and it's finding that commonality. And this children's vision bill, who can't be for children's vision? So
Right.
this has been a relatively easy ask, and we're so excited to have so many of our partners involved.
Well, it's such a great point to, get out there proactively and build relationships before you need them and to help other people. It's, kind of sounds like common sense. And yet in application, we see that a lot of folks wait until they need something to sort of reach out, and then it becomes more transactional. And I'd love to kind of talk about how that manifests not only sort of in the real world, but also in the digital world, because, we can't be in person with people all the time as much as we'd like. Everyone's busy. People are all over the place. And I've seen that LinkedIn is a really great tool for leaders to connect with one another. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, how you use LinkedIn as a platform, who your target audience is on there. Is that a tool that helps you stay up to date with people and to maintain or build some of those relationships that you're talking about?
Yeah, just to step back a second, I think COVID for me and for many people was an eye opener. I did not realize how important those interpersonal relationships were until we got into COVID and I wasn't seeing people personally. And we would be on Zooms, but those would be very transactional conversations. And so when we got back out into in-person meetings, I realized, oh wow, this is what was missing. But we still continue to do so much of our work digitally, and that's why I think LinkedIn for me has been very valuable. Prevent Blindness is on pretty much all of the social channels, but I focus my own attention primarily from a bandwidth perspective on LinkedIn. I do a little bit on Instagram too, but primarily LinkedIn because it allows me to connect and to build those relationships in a different way than I do when I'm having meetings. It allows me to keep up with what our partners are doing. It also, in addition to what, they might be doing from a professional standpoint, it allows me to see, oh, hey, Joe over here, his kid just graduated. So next time I'm talking to him, we can have a conversation about that. And so I really love yes, LinkedIn is mostly professional, but I love that you can learn a bit about the personal side of the people that you're interacting by following them and engaging with them. And it's a different type of engagement than, we're used to of having conversations over dinner or over drink.
In your career, you've done, many things, and especially I'm just impressed with how much you've done outside of your day job, so many leadership roles on boards, et cetera. I wonder if you could just, as you think about your own career arc, share maybe one lesson that you've learned about how to break through the noise and how to influence people to achieve the impact that you want to see as a leader. So what's your kind of takeaway about influence that you would like to leave us with?
I think it goes back to something I said earlier. I try to focus in on relationships, and it's about individuals. And so like whether it's my staff or the board or my personal relationships, get to know the people you're working with, that you're spending time with. And within my staff, for example, get to know the people first and then the teams. So yes, I can be having a conversation with my program team, but that's a group of people. So understand the people you're talking with. Make sure that they understand you, where you're coming from, and just be real. So it really is about those relationships. You have good relationships with the people around you, the people you're trying to influence. Leadership's easy, and it can be fun too.
Well, Jeff, as you underscore relationships, you have some team members you've worked with for a really long time. And I think that certainly is a testament to your focus on relationships. And I've even seen some posts on LinkedIn where you're lifting them up and celebrating them. So I guess I'd ask you, do you find that as you deepen those relationships, that you're using both kind of the in-person and the digital tools as a way to sort of celebrate them?
Absolutely. We love celebrations at Prevent Blindness. We love celebrating our people. We love celebrating our achievements. And one of the things I'm most proud of is we don't have a lot of turnover here. People seem to love to work at Prevent Blindness, and they stick around a long time. I've been with the organization for coming on 22 years, and there are more than a handful of people who've been there as long. And I love whenever we're celebrating someone, to share that news broadly on LinkedIn and other areas. And I also love to share when one of our staff has written some great document or done something great to advance eye care, to share their news. We're a terrific team here at Prevent Blindness, and shouting their successes as well as the organization is really important for me.
Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or of your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.